Hi, thanks for joining me today. Today I'll be telling you a story about my brother that took place in an old mansion in Colorado Springs, Colorado. So grab a snack and let's begin. So let me just tell you a little bit about the house. The house is on the corner of St. Vrain Street, Vrain, and Cascade in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And it was a loan for quite a while, and owners would buy it, and then they would, then they'd sell it or it'd be on the market, and then it would be a loan again for a long time. So it had that history. So that right there should just tell you something. When a house is a loan for so long, there's something going on, because it's a really big house. I'll show you the picture right now. So the house was pretty big. So it had 3 levels above ground, and then the basement at the bottom. What happened was, at one point, one of the owners connected the house next door, bought the house next door and connected them both. So there was just a small dwelling in the middle that connected the 2 large houses. I'll show you that picture next. So the house was alone for about 8 to 10 years. 80s and 90s is when it was alone. And then a couple bought this house and wanted to turn it into a bed and breakfast. So they were doing the renovations themselves, and it took them a while, but they were able to get some people to stay in their house, in their big home. And usually that's something that is appealing to people when they want to go to a bed and breakfast. They want something that's haunted or has some kind of history of haunting, or a little girl in the hallway, something like that. So, that was something that they would advertise. At one point, there was an interview, and he did have me check this out on YouTube. And it was an anchor woman that was talking to, I believe it was the husband, the owner of the house. And as they're talking in a hallway, they start talking about the little girl. It was like, I guess, in the kitchen area. And they didn't hear it right away, but until they played the film back, is usually when you hear all the ghost activities or things that they're saying. They hear a little girl in the background saying something, and they see a small shadow off to the side. So this place was known for this, but it didn't work out for these people, and they had to put it back on the market. And again, it stayed alone for many years, until a company bought it, and they turned the house into apartments. And the one side, the house that's on the corner on Vrain, I'll just say the house on Vrain because that's where he stayed, and the next door neighbor's house, they did combine that house, and one side was for women and one side was for men. It was a huge compound. I'll just show you the aerial view right now. So it was huge. It was massive. So there was a lot of people that could rent out this place at one time. My brother wanted a more private setting, so he chose the attic. So he had his own restroom and his own room. And downstairs, the rooms were smaller, but everyone on each floor had to share a couple of restrooms. So he just wanted it private. So he was at the top, and he was, I believe he was at the front of the house. So he was pretty high up. Well, he moved in. He loved the area. He loved the architecture. It was a really beautiful house, and it had its own parking structure in the back. I'm sure this house at one point had a lot of land on it, so all it had now was just the front yard and then the huge parking structure. So because it was such, the big compound, it had a really lot of parking in the back. I'll show you that picture right now. So there we go. It was pretty big. Lots of people lived there, and my brother really liked it. He enjoyed it. So at this time, my brother was self-employed and he was also going to school. So he was really busy. He didn't have a lot of time for anything. He would, go to work, he'd do his thing, and sometimes at night he'd go to his classes. I'm not sure how many times a week, but he was really, really busy and always tired when he was done for the day. So he began to just notice little things here and there. He loved to cook. There was one kitchen that everyone shared. It was a really big kitchen, and the common room, the living room, they all shared that. And he became friends. He's very friendly, so he was able to make friends. And when he would cook, he really enjoyed it. People would bring him food and like, hey, can you cook tacos tonight? So they would buy all the ingredients and he would cook. So it was a really good environment. So a couple of times they'd be cooking and they'd be talking and gabbing, and he noticed that the lights would go out. They would all notice the lights would go out. It wasn't dark outside, but still they would have to have the lights on. And they just thought, okay, well, he'd get scared at first, and then someone would volunteer to go to the basement to turn on the circuit breakers. And it was kind of a chicken, so he definitely did not want to volunteer ever for that. But so it was little things like that. They also noticed sometimes things would fall on the floor while they would be talking in wherever room they were in, living room, kitchen, things would happen. And they just did not, they laughed at him. A lot of the roommates just laughed and just thought it was funny because they're like, oh, it's an old drafty house. These things are gonna happen. You're so superstitious. They'd laugh and they thought it was funny. So, he just kept it vigilant. He was very vigilant after that because he just thought, well, that's not normal for things to turn off just all the time, every time we were in the kitchen together or things like that. So he always made sure he had a flashlight by his bed just in case if he was studying, or he had a couple of flashlights throughout his room and different locations, different drawers, because he was, always afraid that it would just turn out. And, because it's a big house, it just was dark. And the house was, the way they were not set close to the street. So it was pretty far away. If there was any street lamps, it wasn't really going to reach to the house. Okay, so things like that started to happen. Little things falling on the floor, lights turning off. And he had found out, he was telling me about this house too. He was telling me that the basement at one point had been turned into several different apartments downstairs. It was a pretty good sized basement. I mean, you can imagine the size of the house, the basement could house several people. And he had told me at one point there was several little apartments in there, and a lot of people had refused to stay down there because they did start noticing there was like cold spots and shadows that they were seeing down there. Giggling, little children giggling. So he was not one to want to go down there by himself. So they turned it into a washroom eventually because no one wanted to stay down there. No one wanted to rent those, or they would just move out. So he would ask somebody to go with him. He would try not to go by himself. And sometimes he would just be like, I'm just going to go to the laundromat. So he would just do that. And just because he just was not about to have his life slowed down for something like this. So he definitely was focusing on his work and his studying, and that was it for a while. And, he would notice sometimes his lights would okay, so one night he was studying. This is a funny one. He was studying, and his window, the way it was placed, as soon as you would walk in from his doors, there was a window straight ahead. And right underneath that window, he had a small table, a little desk. And he would study on there and face outside. And so if it was snowing, he could see the snow. He really, enjoyed nature. So he was studying, and the lights just turn off in the house. And it was evening, so everybody needed their lights on, and he could hear people down below kind of, shouting like, hey, the lights are out, hey, and, some people would be whistling just to let everybody know that they were okay, things like that. But he, it really spooked him. So he's always trying to, good thing he had his flashlight, but things like that would happen. And so he just, eventually was thinking, okay, maybe the house is just old, He did feel feelings, and he would see things. He had that ability, but he just didn't like it. He did not like it. So, he would just try and ignore it and just start studying again. So one day he comes home, and it was early in the evening, and he had was going to go take a shower and then go have some dinner downstairs. Everybody was telling him, hey, come join us. So he goes up to the top floor, and he puts his key in for his door, and the door is locked and from the inside. And he thought, well, at first something's, in the way. Is there something like did my bed shuffle over? He was even thinking that somebody was in his room. So he was like saying, hey, get out of my room. This is not funny. And, he would call out a couple people's names thinking, it's this guy. And nothing. He heard nothing. And so he walks downstairs, and he knocks on a couple of doors, and he said, hey, do you know if so-and-so or so-and-so wants to play a joke on me because my door is locked from the inside? And everybody started to come out of their apartments, and they're like, wait, what's going on? So he explained it, and they're like, no, we'd have to climb out from the outside, and it was a pretty steep house, so that's something you really don't want to be doing. It's pretty dangerous to be climbing outside. So they all kind of went and tried to check the door, and sure enough, it was they tried everything to try and open the door, but they realized that it wasn't the doorknob that was locked, because a lot of the people were thinking it was that. Maybe because, they thought maybe the handle was stuck or the actual lock was stuck. But no, it was turning, and then they realized, hey, it's the actual latch that's on the door. So the attic door had a little small latch, circular little end that screws into the frame of the door, and then there's a little hook that is screwed onto the actual door, so you can actually hook that on. That's the thing that was locked. And that takes, that's not an easy thing. That's not something that can just fall into place. That's just something that you have to actually pick up and hook on. So they all kind of looked around a little bit and were a little, nervous laughs. And you could tell he said they were spooked a little bit, but they were trying to just make light of it. And so he could not get into his apartment that night. They had to wait for someone the next day to bring a huge ladder, a handyman, to bring a really tall ladder, and then someone else had to go onto the roof. It was very elaborate. I mean, they had to have somebody on a rope to make sure they didn't fall, because the way that the house was slanted and made and everything, it was just too dangerous. So that happened, and he was now saying, okay, this is something. He would tell everybody, this is something that's not right. This doesn't feel right. And some people didn't believe it. Some people just thought, I've never seen anything in here. This is ridiculous. La la la. I've lived here this long. Well, so there's some people that just don't believe, and they just either they don't want to or they just don't see it. Some people just have it really just turned off, and they just don't experience anything. So little by little, people were starting to believe him. And they were just like, well, I did hear a noise last night. I heard footsteps walking down the hallway on the first floor. And, people were like, yeah, I didn't hear that because I was, dead asleep, things like that. But it just seems like it was taking like turns with one person and then another person. But they would hear footsteps. They would hear a little girl that would be laughing and sometimes running down the hallways. First floor and second floor. And I would, we started to give my brother just a little bit of knowledge just to keep him, focused on his work, his schoolwork. And so we would just say, hey, you tell that if that little girl comes to your room or you hear her outside your door, don't open the door. Just say, go away. Don't come to my door. Don't come to my room. Because you do have that power to send them away or to tell them you don't want anything to do with them. So, even if it's not your house, you definitely can tell them to stop touching you and stop, to leave you alone. For a ghost, of course. A demon is something else. So these things would happen, and, you know, they all kind of started to accept it. And they realized, okay, well, you know, it's haunted. There's a little girl, and there's a few shadows here and there. So they figured it out. And they just got used to the lights turning off, things like that. And people would go in groups to go turn on the lights from downstairs. And sometimes they were spooked out of there because there was, you know, dark shadows and things like that. So they believed it, but they just still stayed in the house. Okay, so he was one day had to go downstairs and he had to do laundry. And I believe it was just really snowing outside. It was just a lot of snow, or there was like rain. I remember the weather was just not agreeable for him. So, and he had a lot of schoolwork. And so he figured, well, I'm just going to do the laundry downstairs. So he gets his laundry, goes downstairs, turns on all the lights before he does anything. And he always made he would look around the perimeter of the room because he just wanted to make sure there was nothing hiding in the corners or things like that. And he turns on all the lights. So the lights were screwed. It was just a light bulb in a special placement in the ceiling. So there was a lot of light bulbs that just hung down. So he was there, and when he turns around, he's filling up the washer and putting his soap in, and he hears a pop behind him. And he turns around, and one of the light bulbs had just exploded. It just popped. So it was glass on the floor. And so he thought, okay, well, the light bulb's old, and it's just old. I don't know. I've never seen a light bulb pop in my house, but that's what he was telling himself. And so he just ignored it, and he thought, oh, I'm just going to leave that there. I'm going to act like I didn't see it. And then turns around again, and then another light bulb pops. And he's like, So he created a good little dark place in the corner of the basement. Real good. It was very dark. So he thought, no, I'm not gonna stay down here. Closed the washer, and he just went back upstairs. And he made sure that someone came with him later on, and they brought a flashlight because he was like, if this place turns completely dark, I don't know what's going to happen to me. So he definitely made sure that someone came with him, and they just thought, okay, well, maybe something's going on with electricity. Maybe, the wiring's old down here. Who knows? Or maybe it's getting, wet. I don't know. So they always try to think of logical things, and they always try to think of that first before they started to get spooked. But eventually they started telling him, hey, I just want to let you know that there is a little girl. I've seen her. I came out at the end of my hallway, and I was locking my door, and I see my hallway, and she's standing there, and she laughs, and then she walks into one of the doors, someone's apartment. And this was early in the morning, and he just thought, I'm going to act like I didn't see that. And I just kept walking. So my brother was like, they were asking him now, what could I do? Things like that. There was even a man that was Native American, and he's very spiritual, and my brother and him would talk occasionally, and they both had ideas of how to protect themselves. They were both different, completely different, but they were very, there were still good things to protect yourself from these spirits. And a lot of people eventually, they first laughed at it, and then eventually they were like, okay, well, how can you help me? Because I'm getting, this little girl's walking in the hallway, or there's a dark shadow in my room. Those dark shadows, that is a good indicator that it is not anything good. Anything black it's not good. So my brother was even leaving booby traps. It was funny because sometimes he started to notice, when you're busy, you're in school, you're doing a lot of things, sometimes you just don't notice things that are moved or disappeared. You just don't notice, hey, well, where was that? I had it here. Maybe I moved it. I've been preoccupied. So he started to notice that things were being moved, or they were on the floor when he would get home. And my brother's very neat. Very neat. He would leave his toiletries, his comb and his, his hair oil, whatever he was using, he had them in straight little lines, very neat. His desk was always put together, and he just was a neat person. So when something was out of place, he would look at it and think, how did that happen? Am I just too tired and I just wasn't thinking straight? So he started to leave booby traps. And he was, taking pictures of how he left his desk. He would take a picture of how he left things in his restroom, his bed, things like that. And I mean, sometimes his little table, his bed would be shifted over. And, because he was that type of person. He had to have his bed a certain way, a certain position, his lamp, things like that. So he noticed that furniture was being moved, not just his own little toiletries and things like that, pencils and books. So we sent him holy water, a small bottle of holy water and some blessed salt and a cross, a metal cross. And we started telling him, you need to pray, you need to push it out with some prayer, you need to get yourself stronger, because it does feed off of your fear. And it needs a source of energy to just get bigger and stronger. So I told him, you need to just start praying it out. So, he didn't know what it was, but he did have those eerie feelings of when he'd be standing, he hadn't seen anything yet. So when he'd be at his desk looking down, he would have that feeling of someone behind him. And, he would turn around, and then in the back corner where, because he would just have sometimes just the light on at his desk, so it would be darker behind him. So he would say, is that a shadow that I see? Is that something, looking at me? But he'd be like, oh no, it's just me. I'm just tired, things like that. So he was starting to think, well, okay, this is something that's probably toying with me. So he would talk to the Native American man, and the Native American man was, very, very spiritual, and told him, hey, here's some sage and other herbs. I think it was like rosemary, sage, pine, something like that. And he was like, he wrapped it around for him with some string, and he just says, put this in the corner where you see the darkness and let it burn. So, my brother was going to do anything. Not just the holy water, he was just, was going to try anything. So he would burn it while he would be studying, and it was just, he loved it. It was enjoyable. And, then the little dish that he had this herb on just landed on the floor. And good thing he had like a wood floor, because if it would have been carpet, it would have caught on fire. And he, jumped up and just started to clean it up, and he thought, well, okay, maybe I left it at the edge of the table of my nightstand. Maybe that's why. But, little things like this, and he was kind of like, nope, don't do this. He was trying to talk to it and saying, don't do this. And so one night he was saying, a quick little prayer, and he started to squirt the water around just like I had told him to do. And he was squirting in every direction, saying his prayer, and sets it down, and he thought, well, I'm going to go get ready for bed. And as he goes into the restroom, he hears something, hit the wall. So he comes out, and all of the holy water, the blessed salt vial, and the cross was all on the floor. And it just slammed against the wall, and he thought, okay, that's not the wind, because I don't have the window open. There's no draft. This is, something that doesn't want me to pray. So, after that point, he noticed that if he prayed, something would fall on the floor, and he would see something dark standing in the corners of his room. So he just started to turn all the lights on. He wanted it really bright in there. And he would say his prayers to himself in his head, not out loud, and it would still know when he's saying the prayers. So it would knock all these holy relics on the floor. He'd even come home from work and late from school one night, and 10:30, and the things would be on the floor automatically. So we started to tell him, hey, use the blessed salt, use your holy water like this, seal it like this, keep it at least somewhere else. So I told him, at least you can probably push it if you can't take it out of the room. Maybe you can just push it into the restroom and just seal the door with the holy water. So he did this. He did do this. And he was, these things do wake you up. They wake you up. You wake up at night. So if you wake up and you don't know why you're waking up at night, you don't have to use the restroom, you're not thirsty, there is something in there. Okay? So he wakes up and he's facing the restroom. And he usually likes to keep the doors closed, closets closed, everything. That's how I am too. I've learned throughout the years as a kid, I always closed everything. I don't want to see anything looking back at me from my closet, things like that. So the door was open and there was a mirror behind that, so he could see the reflection from the light from his window being open, the actual curtains. So as he's looking at that, he's thinking, I thought I closed that bathroom door. And he's looking and he sees a shadow appear from the side of a person, a silhouette of something tall and black. So he's thinking, is this my eyes playing tricks on me? So he turns on his light right next to his his bed, and he still sees the dark shadow in there. I mean, the light can reach a little bit into that bathroom, but not illuminate the whole area. So he still sees it. And then he gets up and he turns on the light because he's thinking, well, what is this? And, of course, when he turns on the light, nothing's there. So he thought, okay, well, I'm just, probably stressed out from school. Turns off the light and he just leaves the door alone. He just walks. He doesn't close it or anything like that. He says he's walking back to his bed and then the door just slams. So he's thinking, okay, all right, whatever's in here, it's pretty pissed off. It's pissed with me because I keep praying and I keep throwing holy water and I've trapped it in the bathroom. So he, doesn't want to hear anything. He doesn't want to see anything anymore. So he definitely tries to keep his door closed and every night make sure it's closed, and he would put a beanie on. He said he would put a beanie on and he'd bring it really low on his face, so it would kind of keep his eyes closed and covered and dark. So, but like I said, these things wake you up. So he wakes up again another night and the light's on in his bathroom, the door is open, and he can hear something in the bathroom. And he thought, well, did I leave the water on? He could hear this whirring sound over and over, something being pulled and unraveling. So he thought, well, is that water or what is that sound? So he gets up and he looks, and it is the toilet paper. Something is pulling the toilet paper and it is spinning and spinning and unraveling, and then it slows down, and then something is pulling it again until the toilet paper is empty. The roll is empty and there's a huge pile of toilet paper off to the side. So he's like, okay. All right, this thing is really mad because I've trapped it in the bathroom. It's really just not letting me rest. So he eventually started to buy earplugs and those sleep masks, and because he didn't want to see any more light, he didn't want to hear anything. So he would sleep with this religiously every night with a beanie pulled down low, that mask, and the earplugs. And that's how he was living his life, because he was like, I can't do this anymore. I got to study. I got to focus on this and that. So this was going on, and for a while, and he told the people where he lived that, this was happening, and some people were starting to move out because they were just kind of like, well, that little girl's in my room more than anything, and I really am getting tired of waking up. So A few people were moving out already because they were just done, and they weren't sleeping well because of this. And new tenants started to move in here and there, and he just, the Native American man also had said, there's not a good vibration in this house, so I'm going to be leaving. I definitely don't want to have anything attached to me. Taking it back, with me. So he moved out as well. So my brother just wanted to get on with what he was doing and just, graduate, live his life, that kind of a thing. So he definitely decided, I'm going to move. I'm going to get ready to move. I'm going to move, right? He had requested the landlord that if he can move downstairs, because he did have a lease and he was trying to not break that lease. So at one point he said he was a delivery. He delivered things, and this was his own business. So he went to his, to work that day, and he was studying for a exam. And so in his truck, he was sitting there eating his lunch, and this was crazy. And he leaned his head up against the back of the truck, and it was a two-seater. It wasn't a big truck. And he had his books next to him on the seat, and spread out, and he was closing his eyes, and he was reciting the thing that he was trying to learn for his class and his quiz. And he says, I was, whispering the words, maybe it looked like a prayer. If no one else knew what he was doing, if you just kind of saw his lips moving, maybe you would think he was praying. And he says when he had his eyes closed, he felt a burning sensation from his forehead down to a little past his nose. And, he pulled the visor down and opened the mirror, and he saw that he had been scratched. He had 3 claw marks down the middle of his forehead, all the way down to his face. So he just could not believe it. He just said he just could not stop staring at himself. Like, how did this happen? I didn't fall asleep. I was, he was, retracing his steps of what he was doing, and he thought, well, I wonder if I brought that thing with me. If I brought that dark thing with me here in this, because I don't see it. And he just was like, I got to get out of that place. So the guys helped him move, and they helped him move down to the 2nd level. Well, the 2nd level wasn't any better. He didn't even care that he had to share a couple of restrooms with other people, but it was no better, because now he was, things were slamming in the middle of the night. And he had, a lot of the rooms had armoires. They didn't have closets, built-in closets, and his was always being locked, and nobody had a key to this. These were from the previous owners, the husband and wife team, and when they sold it, they sold all the furniture with this house. So nobody had this key. So, he had to get people to come and help him to try and pick the lock to see if they can open it. He had he was getting really annoyed with this. So it was no better on the 2nd floor. It was just, things were being toyed with. He'd be locked into something. He couldn't open his door. It just was very trying mentally. So he tells the owner again, I'm going to move to the 1st floor. So he moves to the 1st floor, and now the little girl's down. The little girl's in the little ghost is always in the kitchen, down the hallway, running down the hallway, things like that. So, it just was, no matter where he went, he didn't have any rest. It was just something always there. So, he had seen the little girl standing in his room, and then she would walk out through the door. The door wasn't open, obviously. She'd walk right through it. And it was just, he just couldn't take it, He was getting tired, more and more mentally stressed. I did take a trip out in about 2009, and my whole family, we went for the summer, a nice week, a long vacation out there with him. And we were going to go sightseeing that day, and he had said, hey, I got to pick up something. And so he would meet us at the hotel drive out there. And then he said, oh, I want to pick something up. Can you stop at my place? So we parked in the back. And then, so he tells me, you want to get off? And just me. And I said, no, I'm going to just wait here for you. He really, really wanted me to get off. He wanted to see what I was going to feel or my take on the house. And he said that he wanted to introduce me to the tenants because he had said he had told them about me and that that I could feel things and I could see them. And I just thought, no, I don't want to ruin my trip. I don't want anything to get stuck to me and attached. And then I take it on my trip or to my hotel room and it won't let me sleep. I just thought, no, I'm okay. He really, really wanted me to go in. And I refused because the stories he was telling me, I thought, no way, I'm going to be the one that's going to be stuck with this, whatever I bring back with me. So he definitely moved out. He did not stay the whole lease because it was just too much to take. It just, and it happens. Sometimes you can just leave them behind or sometimes they can go with you. So you got to be real careful. But we had him spray everything down from his clothing with the holy water, all his personal belongings, and I just told him spray them before you put them in boxes, and make sure you spray yourself before you leave that house, and just leave everything. And you say, do not follow me. You cannot come with me. And yeah, his next house was great. He didn't have those issues anymore. But that was a pretty interesting house that he lived in. So if you do have a question about this, go ahead and leave a comment down below. I love to answer your questions, and I'll see you next time, guys. Bye. Thanks.